Hi everyone, back with another update. Sorry it took a little bit longer. I had a small holiday and I thought I could do something while I was there, but well, as I should have known, I could not. Or I did not get around to it. It was a good holiday. So I'm back with the, for now, last video about the sketch, because this is the point where I am now. There will be further updates about it, of course, in the future, but for now, this is where I am. In this iteration, I have added the Plecter Labs animation code, so the code Erv wrote. I took the different definitions and the functions from it that I required and integrated them in the previous iterations of my code, as I showed in my last few videos. So of course I credited Erv up here because this would not have been possible without him. He inspired the entire project, and well, this is simply the code that came from him. So I'll quickly go through the things we've already seen and the new things. So of course these are here already, and as I've commented, those are for the music maker and the NeoPixel. This is a timing related library. It's a library Erv used in his sketch, so of course I included that. Then of course you get the button definitions, the music maker definitions, the definitions for NeoPixels, and then we get to the first set of things from Erv's sketch, and that's the different definitions used later on in his code. Same goes here. Of course, these are for the buttons that I figured out, and this is the these are the global variables for the for Erv's code. And then you get the colors. This is also, I got this from Erv's sketch, but this is simply based on Adafruit setup. As you can read in NeoPixel Uber guide, it explains all the setup. It simply boils down to you only have to reference a color later on instead of all this and the numbers that reference the setting of the pixel determining the color. So in this case I added this one because mine of course has white pixels. This would be full white, everything else disabled, and the other ones I've set it to 0 for now because I'm still experimenting with the colors, and well, this looked fine for now, so we'll see later if I change that. And this is also part of Erv's code with the whole setup that arranges the pixel. I know one of them does the pixel off every once in a while for the C-ring boot up, and it's also there is also something responsible for the animation of the blade. I haven't figured out its code exactly yet, so I simply don't know what everything does exactly at this time, but I'm getting there more and more every time I go through it. And these are the function definitions for his different functions. So then we move on to what we've seen also, the boot up stuff that I did. I have been experimenting with this. This comes from the Music Maker Featherwing guide on the Adafruit website. You have some library commands. They're mentioned differently. I'll show you. Let's see if I go down on the website. You usually have this one here with most of their products, and this is their full guide, so I'll just a single page. I kind of like that, but they do give you an option not to do that. And as is very great, everything, the schematics, everything is here. This has been very helpful for me in other things. So you can see here you have the reset ones, and they're listed here different because I believe in this format they can be placed as functions and called upon. So what I did, I referenced the other code, and as you can see, music player.begin. So this way you can call it as well. I didn't get any errors, so I believe I did it correctly. Might be a thing, it might be wrong, might not be. I'm not completely sure, but I do know that this didn't help me. It still kept hicking up with the audio, but I'll get back to that later. So going through that again, we have the rest of the music maker setup, the boot setup. I included this section from Erv's parse syntax function, and this simply, this I added a serial message myself, so I like to see things at startup when I have everything connected to my computer, so that's not used for anything else. I've added this everywhere, which seems to have fixed my music maker issue where it sometimes hangs on boot, and well, we'll have to see if it actually helps. And then this triggers the affected file. As I'll discuss later, the music maker, this is discussed on Adafruit website, can only handle this 5.8 configuration. I don't know how Adafruit mentioned it, but it has to be named track, and then 3 digits, and otherwise it doesn't, the music maker doesn't understand. So that's why that's named that, and this in this case references the file on the SD card that contains the C-ring boot up animation. And then here we have the actual animation or triggering, in this case sequence boot, which does the C-ring animation, and then this parses this triggers the init sequence function. More on that later. So then we get the button code again, which is checks all the buttons, on which also have some work to do because it's simply not done yet. And then we get to the last bit of code in the void loop. This of course was the first bit, as you can see here, and this section I've been working out how it goes, so I also rearranged Erv's code and all the function orders because that made it easier for me to follow along. So what's happening is that this code, in Erv's case, there was a serial monitoring code that continuously checked for serial communication because, of course, his Arduino board is controlled via his crystal focus board, which sends out serial commands to the Arduino board, and then it knows what to do. What's happening is we'll have to scroll down to this one here, the parse syntax. As you can see here, my my button code always parses the button to parse syntax every time. See, and the parse syntax is a switch. What it does is, based on the number it gets or a letter, it triggers the animation. So what happens is, you see here the different animations. I'm still working with the other ones to get that up and running correctly, so that's still being worked on, but as you can see, that's their switch here. And what then happens, I'll just go back to, here. So the button press parses to that parse syntax function, and the parse syntax function triggers the init sequence with the select animation via the selected sequence unsigned variable, and the init sequence, the selected sequence function also has the disk color changes, as you can see in Erv's video. So if I go a little bit lower, the next one is the init sequence, and this one switches the selection that we got to the selected sequence variable, which is one of the variables. Where is it? Here, up here. So it starts off always as off, sequence off. So back down here. So that's stored in the selected sequence, and in the void loop it continuously checks that and runs the selected sequence, which also makes it possible for when the blade is activated and push the button again, or it gets the other serial command that it deactivates, or it does the clash and everything. That bit I'm still working on, I believe, because since there are a few things here, this might be a default action, or I haven't figured it out exactly, but I just kept everything there, and I'm experimenting, working out how everything works from there. So that's all that. So this just is run on blade initialization, and you have the byte which disk, And if you go up here, byte which disk, I don't know if that's up here. I do know that init blade SAM disk is here in the setup, so that when it boots, it's automatically at SAM disk. And I believe if it's set to Rinsler, of course, it would be red. I haven't experimented with that yet either. This is then first setup. You have then got the part syntax, which is continuously triggered to store the value, to parse the value that it receives, usually from serial, but in this case it gets from the button code of mine. I will probably be adding the serial communication back, as I indicated before, because I want to see if I can add my second M0 with the Bluetooth, so that I have more control options via Bluetooth to do more things with the disk. But that's to come later. So of course you have the different ones here, and of course you have the switching with the colors. I don't fully understand them. I know that in this case the 4 it goes for the disk size, it goes through every LED in this case, adds 1, and then it does the coloring. I understand that much, but I'm still going through it, so I won't be able to be very informative about that one at this point. Then you of course have the init sequence, which is called from the parse syntax, not in all cases, but it is in certain ones. So that goes through there. It stores the value, and also, I believe it also already runs things depending on what's being selected. And then of course, lastly, the animate function here, and that contains the actual animations for the power on, for the power off, for the blade. So it goes through every pixel, gives it the color selected. You have the lockup. This is actually all the animation code. And then lastly, then you get the music maker functions. In this case, only one is there, and I believe it's not required, which is the the file listing helper. And I believe I can leave it out now because I'm not in my first testings. I was calling it from the void setup around here, and it just lists all the files on the SD card. In this case, I believe it can be left out, so that would mean this section here. No, this complete section, sorry. So this can all be left out. But yeah, it's not a bother. I have the space, so I left it in for now, so this could be left out. And then of course, because of a reference to the movie, I have on almost all of my sketches around this project been adding the end of line reference back to the master control, of course. Yeah, it's a fun thing. I thought it was cool to add. So that's all about this code. Yeah, comments about how everything works. If there are people that can explain more about it, I probably can at a later point. At this point, I'm still learning, figuring everything out, and sharing as much as I can, just to give people the insight I've gotten already. If I made a error somewhere, of course, I'm glad to hear, either from Erv. Of course, he knows his sketch. I haven't bothered him too much with things, because yeah, I'm already glad I got what I got from him, and that he agreed for me to share it and use it in my project. So more to come. One of the things I will be doing after this is giving an explanation about all the sound effects, where I got them from, and how I converted everything to use on the disk. It's definitely useful. And later on, I've worked on installing the LEDs in the top section of the disk. I still have to connect them to the board and write them into the sketch, so that I can trigger them using a button to turn off the quote marks holographic emitters on or off. And of course I will be adding a vibration switch to the mix. I can show that one as well, which is this one here. One of those. I had one before, but I unfortunately messed it up because the thin wire is difficult to solder, and I killed it. But that's also to come, because that will be used to trigger the clash and the code, so that if I smack the disc on my hand, it then does the clash where it lights up brighter and gives that. And also to come is a voltage divider that I'm going to be looking into. I found some things about that's very useful, so that I can add a red LED to the mix, which then shows the battery status. When the battery status, when it gets too low, it then shines red LED. If I wait too long after that, turning the disc off, it triggers the kill pin on the fat switch that I've got built in the small breakout board for the switch, and which effectively turns everything off, protecting the battery from getting drained too far. So that's also to come later on. So that's it for now, and after this I'll be uploading a video about the whole music stuff, and you'll be up to date as far as everything goes to this point. So thank you for watching. Yeah, definitely subscribe if you want to follow me along, because there will be things I'll post on the RPF forum from people following me there, and there will also be cases where I'll just be posting here, but it might still be useful if you are following me via other means right now, like the RPF page. So have a good day, and until the next video.